the doctor misdiagnoses your disease, or if the doctor only treats symptoms rather than the underlying illness, you won't get better, you might get worse. And notice it doesn't matter how much the doctor loves you. It doesn't matter how compassionate the doctor is. At the end of the day, if the doctor misdiagnoses what's wrong with you, that's not a neutral event. You won't get better, you might very well get worse.
We constantly are chasing systems and managing symptoms rather than getting to the core issue of the human condition.
You have to make a long-term commitment to a people and a culture to see a long-term change. You can disperse all the aid you want, but the reality is the next day those people are hungry again. It doesn't change their well-being.
One of the key issues that we see in working with people around the world is that not all people are in the same situation. There are some people who are actually completely incapable of helping themselves. In that moment, relief is the appropriate intervention. Relief is a handout. Relief is literally providing something for somebody that they cannot provide for themselves. In the first few hours after the tsunami hits, there's a need for relief work. But once the crisis is over, once the bleeding has stopped, people are actually capable of participating in their own improvement. The primary mistake that most North American churches make is they provide relief in inappropriate contexts. The vast majority of people around the world are not helpless, and we shouldn't treat them as though they are. We should use a more developmental approach that comes alongside of people and walks with them, bringing our gifts to the table and them bringing their gifts to the table so that both of us are more like what God has called us to be.
I think, like myself, we've made a lot of mistakes in this realm of doing mission work. I think people think of it in terms of an experience rather than a relationship. Now, we use the word relationship, but we don't know how to do it because we see people as a problem to be solved. God sees people as people to be known.
So it's over this way?
And I work together with my wife to run a nonprofit called the Sparrow Project that works locally and globally to mobilize churches and nonprofits and state agencies to cooperate. We're really looking to mobilize the church first here in Oklahoma City where we live, and then wherever we find opportunity to do that through relational networks around the world.
The whole of it really started out of a life group. We've been meeting together for several years, and so we just hit a season where we felt like we need to be prepared to give back, and so we all had kind of an interest in, for various reasons, international issues, and so we started volunteering with the organization that resettles refugees as a life group.
As Brad and Kim learned lessons and met others who wanted to be involved, Sparrow grew to more than they imagined. Today, Sparrow helps a lot of volunteers engage in helping others in many different ways, from helping refugees learn English and find a job, to being there for single moms going through a financial crisis. But it all started with the one simple step: a life group. Friends that decided to volunteer time to bring support to refugees in their own community.
And so out of this was born the Sparrow Project, kind of a hands-on, more kind of a personal ministry really with refugees, at the same time bringing awareness to living a missional lifestyle instead of just doing mission projects. How do we mobilize people into living their lives in a way that engages the poor and under-resourced communities where we live and abroad?
Okay, Darian, you're going to be down next, right there. All right, I want to see you score when you get out. 20 seconds. Good job. All right, break, start over, Curry on. If you pin him, start over.
In the early
Start
years
over,
of my
start
life as a follower of Christ, and learning to think godly instead of worldly, I certainly learned that you had to get out of yourself and you had to really care a lot and do a lot for others, enable for God to do His work in you and through you and what He has for you.
Get better. Let's see your shot. Let's see it. Let's see it, Christian. Let's see a good shot. Let's see it, Christian. Christian.
We started at September of 2008. Basically, it started before that when God gave me the idea of having a foundation and a wrestling program for underprivileged kids, for inner city children. Teaching these children to be champions in life is really what it's all about.
All right, don't miss practice. Be a good partner. Be a good partner. That's how you get better. Being a good partner. All right, I've talked real long.
So what are some of the challenges that you see families that you're working with facing?
The families that we work with just have extreme challenges after challenges after challenges. They've just coped and coped and coped and coped and coped in so many different areas that they're now, it's so tough.
You wrestle guys that are strong. You wrestle guys that are really older too.
Relationships is really everything, and that's the first two words of our mission statement is building relationships. And that's where our leadership, our mentoring, and our coaches, that's where it's so important, is that step right there and just building relationships with these children and their families.
It's all about relationships. Tyler's wrestling program has a lot of volunteers who help at wrestling practice or with homework on tutoring days. Being an experienced coach or having a lot of academic knowledge isn't required at all. The one thing that does matter is being there, because it is relationships that matter.
For God to really use you, it does take some commitment, I believe, to do things long term in relationships. And through relationships, you help people learn to restore their relationship with God, and that's the only way to have permanent, long-term change. Anything else is just temporary.
God is fundamentally a relational being. He's three in one. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost exist from all eternity in relationship with each other. And He's wired human beings in His image. We're made for relationship. If poverty is rooted in broken relationships, then it's going to take relational approaches to address that. It's going to take people walking side by side across time in serious, heavy-duty relationships.
There's a reason that there's 1 million nonprofits and the problem isn't solved, because I mean it's common sense, but it's also statistically proven that a relationship is what's going to pull you out of a state of crisis.
It's a relationship. It's not an experience. It's a relationship.
It's a relationship that drives change. And yet in all of our efforts, we miss that fundamental element in our actions. Broken relationships is what it boils down to. It takes effort and a long-term commitment. And oddly enough, it's the very thing we were designed for. But we're left asking ourselves something as well. How do we engage in long-term and restorative relationships with people who are thousands of miles away? What does that even look like?
Through the sciences of transportation and communication, we are able to exchange not only our ideas and achievements, but the material treasures of the world as well. Our goal must be mutual trust, mutual understanding, mutual respect, so that our most distant friends will know how to live with us and we with them in one family of nations on this shrinking world.
If we are going to minister globally, and I do think we're called to do that, again, we are called to do something, but how we do it matters. The first thing I want to do is assume that Jesus Christ is already there. He's been working since the foundations of the world. Whether or not He's recognized by the local people or not it depends on whether or not there are believers there or not, okay? If there are local believers there, there is absolutely no question that our primary function is to get behind the local body who's already there. Look for the local church. Ask, how can you get behind the local church there? How can you support what God is already doing there, as opposed to assuming that there's nothing going on there and we're going to bring it all in? And then the question would be, how can we get behind that person on the ground?
Sometimes we believe that the lack of obstacles is the will of God, but it's not necessarily true in every case. Our country is a country of extreme contrasts. A lot of diversity in climate, in geography, in people, but we have maybe the cancer, if it is social cancer, of the big disparity between rich and poor. So there is a lot of need to put the seed of the gospel in every heart, and also to create tools for these children and their families so that they can face a better future.
A lot of us are familiar with Compassion International's work around the world and their child sponsorship program. However, when working with these local communities, Compassion identified a gap in their efforts to help raise up strong families. In many of the communities they are connected with, a high number of children under 5 years old die due to lack of basic child care knowledge on behalf of the parents. In response, Compassion started what is called the Child Survival Program, or CSP, a program designed to assist mothers of at-risk infants and toddlers by helping train them in family development. Today, Compassion is doing this in over 400 communities worldwide, and their avenue to do so is all through the local church.
The CSP has been working here for 3 to 4 years. Our basic and fundamental development focus is the spiritual growth in the life of every one of the mothers. Our desire is to help in all areas of their developmental life, such as their physical development and the development of their health. However, it's their relationship with Christ, we believe, that will set the foundation for everything in their life.
Perhaps most amazing of all is the work of the promoter. These women literally care for and train mothers by making a visit to their home for about an hour every week, all in an effort to help lead the family to a restored sense of purpose. Gotcha. So when you go into a home, what areas of development are you looking for?
When I arrive in every home, I check their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health, and their spiritual health. Everything we do is possible from the support of our sponsors. They're the ones helping us help our families. We are honored to work with them to help our communities grow.
I think that we have demonstrated that it's a powerful tool for the benefit of the kingdom. The church go outside its walls to the community and provides technical resources, training, counseling, but in the end, it's the mother who is taking the responsibility of the baby.
We have to be cautious from the American mindset that we are the messenger of the gospel to the world, when the fact is God is at work all over the world. We need to see where He's at work and be a part of that and celebrate that with them. Through New Missions right now in Haiti, we have over 10,000 children that are being educated in our schools. And we have had thousands of children graduate through our high school that are now in the workforce, that are serving in Haiti, that have careers and jobs that are giving back to their communities, and families are able to care for themselves and find a new life right where they were born. And it's really at the center of that is the gospel and the establishment of a local church.
New Missions began in 1983 when a school and church were started in a small seaside Haitian village. Today, New Missions has an elementary school and church going in 26 villages. Each school has the capacity for every single child in the village to attend. So how does New Mission decide where to start a new church and school? They start by identifying a Haitian leader with vision and capacity to do so. Then the organization gets behind that leader. As a result, New Missions help turn a local passion into a Haitian-led movement.
You can't develop a long-term relationship with people on the ground by parachuting in for a week and leaving. You can't do it. What you can do is develop a support system for the people who are working on the ground. Support them, encourage them, get behind them, and let them articulate what role you can play. And so it might be identifying some indigenous ministries, some indigenous churches, and asking the question, what can we do to walk with you across time?
We can have an aspiration to show up and be that agent of change, but there may already be a man or a woman on the ground that can be that agent of change and probably be more effective culturally, be more effective from a language standpoint, be more adapt, from an environment standpoint. And that's a challenge of an assumption that, I could be super significant if I go into the outermost parts of the earth, but God can send you there through someone still, and that can make a world of a difference.
We have 331 children in the school, and we teach in 2 sessions, both in the morning and in the afternoon. I serve as the pastor and the school director for the mission. We know that it's not easy for the families in our village. There are many challenges in each child's life. The cause of the economic problems for everyone is complicated, but in all situations we give thanks. When a child doesn't attend school, there's a greater risk of poverty in the family. There's no development. But when a child comes to school, they learn, find food and eat. It's a great advantage for the entire family because the child's life is changed and they can contribute to the family's well-being because of their education. I've lived in this village ever since I was a child. Now I'm helping to develop this area for advancement. It is by God's grace that the work here continues. We hope and pray that God will bless each person within the mission, that He will bless their work and their families for the continued effort of the church in this area.
It's all about relationships. That insight is what helps us respond more thoughtfully to a person in a state of crisis who may come across our path. We can also open the door to relationships by involving ourselves through our local church or by working with local organizations that share in our own passion. And while we may not be able to be in long-term relationships with people in many areas of the world, our desire to help can still be lived out by learning and understanding how we can support the relationships that are there long-term. A commitment to building and supporting a long-term restorative relationship. It's what we're wired for. It's what initiates change. And it's a step we all can take.
If you walk up to a person and say to them, in essence, what's wrong with you? You're exacerbating the very problem we're trying to solve. So I would look for organizations that use an asset-based approach. To start off with the goodness of creation. To start off by assuming that the people in that community are what Scripture says they are. They're people created in the image of God who have dignity and worth and capacity. Start with that. And so an asset-based approach literally says to people, what gifts do you have? What are you good at? What skills do you have? What abilities do you have? What are the good things that are already happening in the community? The question itself is an empowering question because they are being asked to consider the idea they might actually be somebody. They might actually be something.